tonight we'll drift into a corner of history so wonderfully uneventful, so perfectly ordinary, that your mind can wander freely and softly toward rest. Dim your lights if you haven't already. Let the room grow quiet except for the gentle hum of whatever keeps you comfortable. Maybe a fan, maybe a heater, maybe nothing at all but the far-off tick of a clock. Settle under your blanket, pull it around your shoulders just enough to feel like a warm cocoon. If this calm journey helps you unwind, tap like and subscribe. Only if it feels right. Only if it feels as gentle as turning a page without thinking. Now, imagine a low amber glow from an oil lamp, the kind that makes shadows curl lazily along the walls. Outside, somewhere far away, the night breeze nudges a loose shutter. We're about to travel back, but not to wars or emperors. No, tonight we're stepping into the quiet, slightly damp world of Roman plumbers and the curious things they knew about lead, and then, in time, somehow forgot anyway. Let me tell you, the first thing you'd notice if you were following me through the winding streets of a 2nd century Roman town is that plumbing was not glamorous. The word itself, plumbum, meant lead, and the men who worked with it had a reputation for steady hands and forearms that looked like they'd been carved from oak. But this isn't the clang and bang sort of work. It's the slow tap of hammer on pipe, the soft squeak of molten metal poured into seams, the faint smell of charcoal from the brazier that kept their tools hot. Picture us stepping into a dim workshop. The air is thick with a dusty, sweet metallic scent, like coins that have been in your pocket too long. Against the far wall, a line of clay amphorae leans, each with its own dark stain where water had spilled and dried over and over. On a low bench, a slab of lead sheet rests, its dull surface catching the lamplight in lazy glints. If you run your fingers across it, carefully, mind you, it's strangely soft for a metal. Like butter left out too long, it yields a little. Why lead? The Romans liked it for the same reason you might like a soft cheese knife. It did the job without fuss. You could bend it, hammer it, stretch it into shapes, and it wouldn't complain. But here's the curious thing. Even in the writings of Vitruvius, the famous Roman architect, there's a little caution. He noted, somewhere around the year 15 BCE, that water carried through lead pipes wasn't as wholesome as water from clay conduits. And yet, clay was brittle. Clay didn't like to be bent around corners. Clay was the stubborn mule of the piping world. So the plumbers, plumberi, shrugged and kept working. Maybe they figured the water tasted fine. Maybe they believed the flow itself washed away whatever danger might lurk in the metal. Or maybe, like the baker who knows his oven smokes a little but swears it adds flavour, they simply liked the way lead behaved under their hands. Imagine for a moment crouching beside a half-finished pipe section. You're holding the bell end of one length, sliding the narrow end of another inside. The seam is tight, almost perfect, but there's a little gap that will need filling. A small ladle of molten lead is waiting, wobbling slightly in the plumber's grip. He tips it slowly, and the silvery liquid slides into the seam like honey on a cold morning, filling every gap before setting into a dull skin. The sound is not dramatic, just a faint hiss as the heat meets the cooler pipe. You might hear a pigeon coo somewhere outside the workshop door. And here's where the history turns a little sleepy. Wonderfully so. Day after day, year after year, the plumbari would make, mend and lay pipes that wound under the cobblestones. They'd run them to fountains where water trickled endlessly, to baths where steam clouded the air and turned the marble slick underfoot, to private homes where a trickle in a kitchen corner felt like the height of convenience. It's not so different, really, from the way you or I might fuss with a leaky faucet. Except in Rome, the faucet might be a carved bronze spout in the shape of a dolphin, and the fix might involve melting and pouring a material we now avoid in anything that touches drinking water. But to them, it was just another Tuesday. Have you ever noticed how some things seem so obvious in hindsight? The Romans did know, at least vaguely, that lead could cause problems, but problems is a slippery word. To a 1st century plumber, a problem was a burst pipe under a busy market street. A problem was a customer complaining that the bath in their villa no longer filled before the water cooled. Invisible hazards, the kind that creep in quietly over years, weren't problems in the same way. And so, the city kept drinking, bathing, washing and cooking with water that had meandered its way through miles of lead channels. Plumbers kept shaping sheets into cylindrical tubes, kept soldering joints, kept leaving their fingerprints, quite literally, in some cases, pressed into the soft metal. Archaeologists today sometimes find those prints, still faintly visible after nearly 2,000 years, like a signature left on a job well done. The funny thing is, if you asked a Roman plumber what the most challenging part of the job was, he might not mention the weight of the lead or the awkwardness of crawling into a narrow service trench. He might talk instead about the customers, about Senator so-and-so who wanted his fountain to have a more refreshing sound, or about the neighbour who thought her neighbour's water tasted rounder and demanded the same pipework. Lead was simply the canvas. Lead was simply the canvas. The art was in making water go where it should and nowhere else. And perhaps there's a quiet beauty in that. In the rhythm of the work, in the way the tools warmed the hands, in the quiet sizzle of solder meeting pipe, in the knowledge that when you were done, something would flow smoothly where before it did not. Maybe that's why, even with whispers about its dangers, the trade kept on. Like a baker still using the same family oven, the Plumbari trusted what they knew, or thought they knew, and let the rest drift away like steam in the bathhouse. And as we leave that warm workshop, stepping back into the narrow street where lamplight pools in little golden puddles on the cobblestones, we can hear the faint rush of water underfoot. It's the sound of the city's lifeblood, carried in channels of soft, silvery metal just as it had been the day before and the year before that. Now, let your mind wander too. If we were to follow one of those pipes, not with tools and torches, but with the calm, invisible drifting of the imagination, we'd find ourselves in a place where the Roman love for water met their love for lingering. The bathhouse, a public space that was less about getting clean and more about being in warm company, surrounded by sound and steam. You've stepped inside now, so close your eyes for a moment and feel it, a soft, damp heat wrapping around you, the kind that makes your shoulders drop without you realizing. The air hums faintly with conversations, some in low murmurs, some bright with laughter, bouncing off the marble walls. Water trickles somewhere nearby, a sound so steady it might as well be part of the building itself. The pipes we left behind in the street feed this whole place. They bring in hot water for the caldarium, the hot bath, and cooler flows for the frigidarium, the cold plunge. It's a little like the ancient Roman version of spa day, except here, the same plumber who mended a fountain in the forum might have worked on the channels that fill these pools. And yes, those channels too are lined in lead. If you wade into the caldarium, the heat seeps into your skin. It's almost too warm at first, like stepping into a summer lake on the kind of day where the sun has been fierce. But after a few breaths, it feels as though your bones are sighing. The marble floor is slippery underfoot, and the faint smell of olive oil drifts by. Someone nearby is rubbing it onto their skin before a massage. It's easy to imagine the plumbers of old testing these flows, leaning down to check the joints in the dim, steamy underbelly of the baths, perhaps pausing to warm their hands near a pipe before crawling back into daylight. There's something deliciously slow about life here. People come not just to bathe, but to talk, to deal, to hear the latest bit of gossip about which senator has bought which villa, or whose chariot wheel came loose during yesterday's races. You might think of it as a combination coffee shop, gym and social club, except instead of espresso and treadmills, there's warm water and sandals squeaking softly on wet stone. A little historical pebble to drop into our calm pool, the baths of Caracalla, opened in the year 216 CE, could hold an estimated 1,600 bathers at once. Imagine the network of plumbing needed for that. A tangle of channels and pipes under the floors, each one cut, bent and sealed by hand. No pressure gauges, no PVC fittings, just skill, repetition, and the forgiving nature of lead. I wonder sometimes, and maybe you do too, whether the plumbers ever stayed to enjoy the baths after their work. Picture a tired man, hands streaked with the grey of his trade, lowering himself into a corner of the warm pool when the crowds had gone. Maybe he closes his eyes, listening to the echoes in the vault above, knowing that somewhere behind the wall the water is flowing exactly as he left it. And here's the quiet twist. Even in these luxurious settings, the dangers of lead still trickled through every cupful and every splash. But like a faint flavour in a well-loved recipe, it was so woven into daily life that few thought to change it. The baths were symbols of the Empire's generosity, its engineering genius. To point out something invisible and harmful would have felt, perhaps, like missing the point entirely. There's a small comfort in knowing that our ancient counterparts also let themselves be lulled by habit. The baths were warm, the water clear, the pipes obedient, and so the Romans soaked, talked, and drifted through their days much as we might linger in a favourite cafe, ignoring the squeaky hinge on the door because the coffee's good and the chairs are just right. When at last we step out of the caldarium, the cooler air of the tepidarium greets us. It's a gentle transition. No shock, just a soft easing into a milder warmth. Our skin tingles faintly, and somewhere behind a mosaic wall, a lead pipe hums with the sound of moving water. The same sound we left in the street. The same sound we might follow again, out through the baths, past the portico where sandals slap lightly on stone, and into the fading light of the day. Now, as the marble fades behind us and the city's hum returns, let your mind wander toward a quieter corner still. If we were to keep walking from the bathhouse, the steam still clinging faintly to our hair, we might find ourselves in the market, the Macellum, where the air smells not of marble and olive oil, but of baking bread, ripe figs, and the sharper tang of fish laid out on beds of crushed ice hauled in from the hills. The market is a mosaic of voices, each one haggling or laughing, with the occasional shout from a stallholder hawking something they swear you won't find fresher anywhere else. Imagine ducking under a striped awning to escape the midday sun. The canvas above rustles softly, and a lead pipe trickles a thin stream of water into a stone basin at the corner of the stall. It's there for rinsing produce, and for thirsty hands to cup water between purchases. That water has travelled the same hidden path as the bath's supply, winding under streets and past homes. You can almost hear it if you lean close, a steady glug as it feeds the basin. The stall owner, a wiry man with skin the colour of sun-baked clay, swears it's the sweetest water in the city. He dips a ladle in and offers you a sip, and in the way of sleep stories, the taste is more about the moment than the chemistry. Cool, refreshing, a little metallic, like the way rainwater feels in your mouth if you've ever tilted your head back in a summer shower. Now, markets in Rome were also a kind of food museum. Some stalls sold honey-soaked pastries, flat, chewy, and sticky enough that you'd be picking threads of sweetness from your fingers hours later. The closest modern comparison might be something between baklava and a toaster strudel, if the toaster strudel had been left in the sun to turn its filling into a slow-moving amber. Others sold savoury pies stuffed with minced meat, herbs, and pine nuts. Little portable meals, the ancient equivalent of a grab-and-go lunch, though without the branded paper bag. A small historical pebble here. In the 1st century CE, the satirist Juvenal grumbled that Rome's obsession with food was matched only by its obsession with waterworks, as if every street needed its own fountain and every citizen his own pastry. It's a pairing that, in hindsight, feels strangely perfect. And here's where the plumber's shadow stretches into the market. Those basins, fountains, and rinsing troughs all had to be fed somehow. Somewhere nearby, a plumbarius had crouched to fit the joints, tested the flow, maybe cursed quietly when a fitting leaked, then soldered it closed with molten lead. The water didn't ask where it was going, it simply went, filling cups, washing figs, splashing hands sticky with honey. Sometimes I think of the market as the heartbeat of a city and the plumbing as the veins. Without them, things dry up, slow down, grow stale. The Romans understood that, even if they didn't understand the finer points of toxicity. And so, they built their veins of lead without hesitation, proud of the way they could guide a hillside spring into the middle of a bustling square. You can stand in the middle of that square now, eyes closed, and hear it all. The clatter of amphorae being set down, the scrape of a knife trimming greens, the soft patter of water into stone. You might feel the sun on your face, the breeze carrying the smell of roasting chestnuts. you might notice the way your shoulders loosen just a little more, because this isn't the frantic rush of modern life. It's the slow, winding rhythm of a city that knows how to linger. And when the market day fades, the pipes will still be there, humming underfoot. They'll be there in the morning too, ready to carry the first trickle to the baker's kneading table or the fishmonger's rinse basin. The city sleeps, the pipes keep flowing, and time moves on with the same steady patience as a ladle filling a cup. And as we step away from the market, the sound of water softens, replaced by the muffled beat of sandals on the stone road. Ahead, a quieter lane calls, where shadows are longer and the air smells faintly of... The lane narrows, the kind where two carts would have to negotiate carefully to pass one another. Though here, in the fading warmth of the day, there's only the echo of footsteps. The air has changed. Gone is the bustle of the market. Now there's the faint smell of baking grain, the gentle hum of conversation, drifting from a doorway, and the slow splash of water from a wall fountain tucked into a recess. This fountain is simple, just a half-round basin under a carved spout shaped like a lion's head. The lion's eyes stare eternally ahead, but its mouth has been flowing for decades, maybe longer. The water falls in a soft ribbon into the basin, making that rounded, looping sound water makes when it meets its own reflection. A stray cat sits on the rim, tail curling lazily, waiting for a drink. If you were to crouch down and follow the fountain supply line, and in this story, of course, you can, without so much as scraping a knee, you'd find a narrow lead pipe running behind the wall. It's been bent carefully, almost tenderly, to hug the curve of the masonry. This was the work of a steady hand, maybe decades ago. The pipe is held in place by small lead straps nailed into the stone, each one hammered just enough to grip without pinching. It's not hard to imagine the plumber pausing here, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand, glancing toward the bakery down the street. Perhaps he could smell the bread baking even then, the same way you and I can now. The scent is warm and nutty, with that faint edge of char from the crust that makes your mouth water before you've even seen a loaf. Bakeries in Rome had their own quiet relationship with plumbing. Bread dough needs water, clean enough to mix, plentiful enough to rinse tools, and sometimes warm enough to coax yeast into life. That water often arrived through the same network of lead veins as the fountains and baths. Inside, the baker's apprentice might have filled a clay jug from a tap no bigger than your thumb, the stream catching the afternoon light before disappearing into the mix. I like to think the bread picked up the memory of that journey, not in taste exactly, but in story. Each loaf a small edible record of hillsides and springs, of pipes fitted and soldered, of the murmured curses of plumbers bent double in narrow channels. Most people eating it wouldn't have given that a thought. But here, in our drifting walk, we can, and the bread itself? Oh, the Roman loaves were hearty things, round with a scored top that baked into 8 tear-apart wedges. The closest modern cousin might be a crusty boule, though these were often denser, meant to last a day or two without going stale. Break one open and the smell blooms outward, yeasty and warm, almost enough to make you forget you meant to share. A small historical breadcrumb. In 79 CE, a bakery in Pompeii left dozens of such loaves baking when Vesuvius erupted. Archaeologists found them centuries later, carbonized but still holding their shape, like a shadow of breakfast caught in stone. Somewhere under that ancient crust, there might still be the faintest trace of minerals from the lead-lined pipes that fed the bakery's water supply. As the day leans toward evening, the bakery's doorway glows from within. People step in and out carrying cloth-wrapped bundles, each one releasing its own ribbon of warm, bready scent into the cool air. The fountain still trickles, the cat still waits, and the pipes underfoot keep their slow, steady hum, moving water toward the next task, the next taste, the next quiet corner of the city. And as we step away, leaving the lion fountain behind, the lane bends toward a small courtyard where something sweet is waiting in the shadows. The lane gives way to a square no bigger than a few dining tables set edge to edge. The light here is soft, caught between the last gold of the sun and the first deepening blue of the evening. You can hear the flutter of cloth from an upstairs balcony, the lazy creak of a rope as laundry sways, and from somewhere close by, the unmistakable smell of honey. It comes from a modest shop tucked into one corner, the doorway framed with simple painted columns. The sign above is just a small wooden board, but inside the shelves hold jars glowing like captured sunlight. This is the apothecary's sweet corner, not for medicine today, but for indulgence. In Rome, honey was more than a treat. It was the sweetener for nearly everything, stirred into wine, spread on bread, folded into cheese. Step inside and you're met with warmth. The air is heavy with the scent of beeswax, dried herbs, and the faint metallic tang from a small basin in the back where water runs steadily. That basin, too, is fed by a narrow lead pipe, tucked discreetly behind jars of figs and almonds. The water doesn't gush, it trickles, as though it knows it has all the time in the world. On the counter, the apothecary has laid out small honey cakes, each one a golden disc dusted with a pinch of sesame. If you pick one up, your fingers stick just slightly, the glaze catching the light. Bite in, and the crumb is soft, almost melting, the sweetness round and deep. Nothing like the sharp snap of modern candy. It's a slow, thoughtful sweetness, like the hum of a bee on a still afternoon. Here's a gentle historical thread. In the 1st century CE, Pliny the Elder described honey as a gift from the gods, a food that could heal, preserve, and please in equal measure. It was one of the few ingredients that never truly spoiled. And so, shops like this were a kind of bank for sweetness, holding reserves for feast days, for gifts, or for those moments when life needed softening. The water in the back basin might seem an afterthought, but it's part of the rhythm here. The apothecary dips a cloth in it to wipe sticky fingers, rinses a small pot after pouring melted honey, washes the stone slab where nuts are chopped. All of it possible because somewhere, a plumbarius bent a sheet of lead, shaped a fitting and soldered a seam until no drop could escape before reaching this room. You might notice, if you linger, the gentle music of the place, the soft clink of ceramic lids, the muffled knock of a pestle in a mortar, the sigh of a wooden door easing shut. Outside, the courtyard catches those sounds and holds them, mixing them with the faint splash from a nearby fountain. The air feels cooler now, the day folding itself into evening. The apothecary wraps your cake in a square of cloth, ties it with a loop of twine, and nods you toward the street. No rush. Nothing in this little square seems to hurry. The pipes hum quietly in the walls, the honey glows in its jars, and the city waits for the lamps to be lit. As you step back outside, you can hear, just beyond the courtyard, the muted rumble of a tavern, and with it the scent of something rich and savoury drifting on the air. The courtyard narrows into a short alley, its cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of sandals and cartwheels. Lanterns are being lit one by one, their flames flickering gently behind thin panes of horn. You can hear the low murmur of voices now, rising and falling like a tide, and beneath it, the steady beat of something being stirred in a heavy pot. The tavern door is open just enough to let out a warm rush of air, fragrant with herbs, garlic, and the deep, mellow aroma of stewed meat. Inside, the light is amber and soft. Shadows curl into the corners while the centre of the room glows with the heat from a small hearth. A few patrons sit hunched over cups, their voices blending into a comfortable background hum, like bees in a distant garden. Behind the counter, a pot simmers, a rich concoction of lentils, onions, and chunks of pork shoulder that have been cooking since the sun was high. The broth is thick, almost creamy, flecked with green from parsley and dill. This is no quick meal, it's the kind that rewards patience, the way bread rewards a slow rise. And yes, even here, plumbing has a quiet role. In the back corner, barely noticeable, a small stone sink lets out a steady thread of water, fed by a narrow lead pipe running up through the floor. The tavern keeper uses it to rinse mugs, splash over herbs to freshen them, or add a measured pour to the stew when it thickens too much. The pipe hums faintly when you lean close, as if it's part of the tavern's own heartbeat. Romans loved these sorts of one-pot meals, especially in cooler months. They were filling, easy to keep warm, and made good use of whatever was on hand. Think of it as the ancient cousin of a crock-pot recipe, except the crock-pot was a clay cauldron, and the power source was a wood fire tended by someone who knew exactly when to nudge in a fresh log. A little historical ladleful. In 30 BCE, the poet Horace described a simple dinner of pulses and greens as more satisfying than any banquet of imported delicacies. There's comfort in that. The idea that even at the height of the empire, a bowl of something hot and hearty could feel like enough. You might notice as you sit here, the way the tavern sounds blend into something soothing. The soft scrape of a ladle on the pot's bottom, the clink of a cup set down, the faint splash of water in the back sink. The smells wrap it around you, layers of meat and herbs and wood smoke, until it feels as though the outside world has slowed to match the tavern's pace. When the stew is ladled into a bowl and set in front of you, steam curls up to fog your vision for a moment. The first spoonful is rich, the pork falling apart with almost no effort, the lentils smooth and earthy. There's a hint of something tart, maybe a splash of vinegar added at the end, that makes you want to linger over each bite, and linger you do. Time here isn't measured in minutes, but in how many sips of broth it takes before the hearth's warmth seeps into your bones. Outside, the alley has gone fully dark, the lanterns glowing softly against the stone. The lead pipe in the corner keeps its gentle trickle, unbothered by the changing night. When you finally stand, the tavern keeper gives a nod. Not a farewell, just an acknowledgement that you'll pass this way again. And as you step into the cool air, the smell of stew still clinging to your clothes, you hear the faint plink of water from somewhere up ahead, leading you toward another story entirely. The street curves gently to the left, its stones catching the pale wash of moonlight. The air feels cooler here, touched by the damp breath of nearby water. You hear it before you see it, a rhythm that's neither hurried nor perfectly steady, like the slow drip from a ladle after it's been dipped. The sound draws you to a small public fountain, tucked between two unassuming buildings. It's not grand like the ones in the forum. This one is simple, a stone basin worn smooth inside, fed by a thin stream from a bronze spout shaped like a fish's mouth. The fish's lips glisten in the moonlight as the water flows, falling into the basin with that sleepy, endless sound. Lean close and you can see where the spout joins the wall. The lead pipe behind it emerges just long enough to meet the bronze fitting before vanishing again into the stone. Its surface is darkened by time, a little rippled where the plumber's hammer tapped it into place decades ago. Whoever did the work left it neat and almost invisible, a quiet sort of craftsmanship meant to last. The water here is cool, almost cold even in summer. Locals come to fill small amphorae or simply to splash their faces before heading home. Tonight a single jar rests on the basin's edge, beads of condensation catching the light. If you dip your fingers into the stream, it slips around them like silk before dripping back into the pool. Nearby, a bench of weathered wood leans slightly to one side. You sit, and the smell of damp stone rises up, mixing with the faint aroma of mint from a patch growing in the cracks nearby. There's a hush to this spot. Not silence exactly, but a softening of the city's noise. You can hear sandals on the stones somewhere far away, the occasional creak of shutters, the muted coo of a pigeon settling in for the night. A small historical note drifts in like a feather. Fountains like this were part of Rome's promise to its people, that water would be accessible even for those without private connections at home. By the 1st century CE, the aqueduct system fed hundreds of these modest fountains across the city. Each one was a quiet meeting place, a shared pause in the flow of the day. I imagine the plumbers who kept them running often visited at odd hours, when the crowds were gone. They'd check the fittings, clear debris from the basin, maybe test the flow by letting it spill over their hands. In moments like this, under the moon, the work must have felt less like a job and more like tending a living thing. You lean back against the bench and let the fountain's sound settle into you. Drip, pause, drip, drip. Each note falls into the stillness like a pebble into a pond, rippling outward until it fades. Time stretches. You could stay here as long as you like. Eventually, though, the street calls again. Not urgently, just with the quiet curiosity of wondering what's around the next bend. You stand, the cool damp still clinging to your fingertips, and follow the sound of faint music drifting from somewhere ahead. The notes reach you as a gentle thread in the air, weaving between the stones and shadows. It's the kind of tune that doesn't ask for attention, just offers itself if you care to listen. A slow melody plucked on what might be a kithara, the Roman cousin of the lyre. As you turn the corner, the street opens into a small square bathed in lamplight. A few people sit scattered around, some on low stools, others perched on the edges of planters. At the centre, a man in a faded tunic leans against a column, his instrument resting on his knee. He plucks each note with a kind of patient familiarity, letting the sound hang in the air before reaching for the next. The square smells faintly of roasted chestnuts. There's a small brazier nearby, the vendor turning them slowly so the shells split just enough to reveal the soft, steaming nut inside. The warmth of the brazier blends with the cooler air drifting from a fountain in the corner. The fountain's bowl is half in shadow, its trickle barely audible under the music. If you wander closer, you'll see how the water reaches it. A slender lead pipe emerges low on the wall, almost shyly, delivering a steady, clear flow. It's been patched once or twice, the seams sealed with careful rings of solder that gleam faintly in the lamplight. The fountain's basin is shallow, carved from a single block of stone, and it reflects both the water and the warm flicker of nearby flames. Someone hands you a paper twist of chestnuts. The shell feels dry and warm under your fingers. When you crack one open, the nut inside is soft, earthy, and sweet in a quiet way. It's a flavour that asks you to slow down, to sit, to peel one at a time, to let the music and the taste and the scent fold together. Here's a gentle historical morsel. Roasted chestnuts were a common winter snack in ancient Rome, sold from street braziers much like this. They were cheap, filling, and easy to carry. Fuel for evening walks or long conversations. You can imagine a plumber finishing his day's work and stopping for a handful before heading home, the warmth of the nuts balancing the cool of the evening. The musician shifts to a slower tune now, one that winds upward and then drifts down like the path of a leaf in still air. A few people hum along, though softly, as if not to break the spell. Somewhere behind you, the water in the fountain keeps flowing, its own constant song, unnoticed until you pause to hear it. As the brazier's coals settle into a deep, steady glow, the air grows cooler. The music, the fountain, the warmth of the chestnuts. They all blend into something that feels like a pause between pages in a book. The kind of pause you could stretch for minutes or hours. Eventually the tune winds down. The last note hangs in the air, fades, and leaves behind only the sound of water and the quiet shuffle of people heading home. You rise, still holding the gentle warmth of the chestnuts in your palm, and follow the faint scent of baking that drifts from a street just beyond the square. The air carries it before you even see the source. That slow, toasty smell that wraps itself around you like a soft blanket. It's not the sharp scent of bread from the bakery earlier. This is richer, sweeter, with just a hint of spice hiding somewhere in it. The street here is quiet, lined with small workshops whose shutters are already closed for the night. At the far end, a warm glow spills from a low doorway. Inside, you find a baker's side room. Not for loaves this time, but for treats meant to linger on the tongue. The kind of things people buy just to have with wine, and then somehow finish before the amphora's halfway gone. On the wooden table near the hearth, small pastries rest in neat rows. They're crescent-shaped, the edges pinched together in a crimp that looks almost decorative. The baker is pulling another tray from the oven, and the smell deepens. Honey, nuts, and a whisper of cinnamon. He sets them down with a soft thud, the warm air around them curling upward. A little basin of water stands to one side, fed by, yes, another narrow lead pipe disappearing into the wall. The water trickles into the basin with the same patient rhythm you've heard all evening. The baker uses it to dampen cloths for covering dough, to rinse sticky fingers, and to cool the edge of a pastry cutter. It's as much a part of the kitchen as the hearth itself. Pick up one of the pastries and the crust flakes just a little under your fingers. Bite in and you meet a filling of chopped almonds, sesame, and honey. Soft, warm, and just sticky enough to slow you down. The sweetness isn't sharp. It's the kind that builds gently like a candle brightening a dim room. Here's a quiet historical sprinkle. Nut-filled pastries were known in Rome at least by the 1st century CE, often served at banquets alongside fruit and wine. The honey was both a sweetener and a preservative, making the treats last long enough to be carried on journeys, or hidden away from particularly sweet-toothed family members. The baker hums as he works, the sound blending with the hiss of the oven and the steady drip of water. Outside, the street has cooled, the stones darkened by the evening air. You can hear, faintly, the footsteps of someone heading home, their sandals clicking in a rhythm that matches the drip from the basin. You stay long enough to take another bite and then another, until the pastry is gone and only the faint stickiness on your fingers remains. A quick rinse in the basin's cool water, and even that is gone, leaving only the lingering taste of honey and the warmth in your chest. When you step back into the street, the scent of baking fades slowly, replaced by the distant, familiar rush of water flowing under the stones. You follow it, curious where it might lead next, until the path opens onto a street lined with lamplight and the faint scent of fresh herbs. The light here is warm and low, caught in the glass of oil lamps hanging outside doorways. Shadows sway gently across the cobbles as the evening breeze stirs them. That faint herbal scent grows clearer, a blend of rosemary, thyme, and perhaps a little mint, carried on the cool air from somewhere just ahead. It leads you to a small shop where bundles of dried herbs hang from the ceiling, their leaves rustling softly when the door opens. Inside, the air feels almost velvety, thick with the mingled perfumes of plants gathered from hillsides and gardens. In one corner, a narrow lead pipe feeds a shallow stone basin. The water is clear and calm, just a few ripples spreading outward as drops fall from a sprig of basil the shopkeeper has just rinsed. The shopkeeper is a wiry man with hands stained green at the tips, the sign of someone who handles fresh leaves daily. He offers you a seat on a low stool and a small dish of olives, plump, glossy and steeped in oil scented with crushed rosemary. The briny bite gives way to the mellow richness of the oil, and the herbal note lingers in the back of your throat like the echo of a song. The basin's water is not for drinking here. It's for washing herbs, soaking roots, and sometimes steeping dried leaves into a light rinse used to freshen the air or clean stone counters. The lead pipe that brings it in has been part of the shop for longer than anyone remembers, patched here and there, but still reliable. A quiet historical leaf for you. Romans prized fresh and dried herbs not just for cooking but for medicine, ritual and scent. Rosemary was thought to strengthen memory, mint to invigorate the spirit, thyme to purify the air. Shops like this were a kind of crossroads between kitchen, pharmacy and temple. The shopkeeper moves slowly, unhurried, as if the pace of the leaves themselves has settled into his bones. He plucks a sprig of thyme from a bundle overhead, holds it under the water's trickle, and then crushes it lightly between his fingers. The scent bursts upward, sharp and green, before softening into something almost sweet. You breathe it in, and for a moment, it's as if the street outside has fallen away. There's only the scent, the quiet drip of water into the basin, and the creak of the stool as you shift slightly. Time folds here like parchment under a practiced hand. When you rise to leave, the shopkeeper presses a small bundle of mint into your palm. Its leaves are cool and faintly damp from the rinse, and the scent follows you out into the street. The lamps sway, the shadows lean, and the steady undercurrent of the city's hidden water calls you onward, toward a place where stone and sound meet in an echoing chamber beneath the night. The street narrows and dips, the stones underfoot changing from sun-warm to cool, as if they're holding the memory of shaded places. Ahead, an archway leads into a low passage, its walls breathing out a faint dampness. You can hear it now, that soft, hollow murmur of water in a confined space, the sound bouncing back to itself in a lazy rhythm. Inside, the air is cooler still, with a smell that's part earth, part stone, and part the faint metallic tang of old pipes. A small lantern flickers against the wall, its light catching the curve of an arched ceiling. The sound of water grows clearer, until you come to a shallow channel cut directly into the floor, running alongside a walkway. Here, the The lead piping is not hidden in walls or under streets. Instead, you can see it. Short sections connecting to small spouts that feed into the open channel. The metal looks dark and tired, patched over time with layers of solder that have smoothed into strange organic shapes. A plumber's quiet signature, written in curves and seams instead of ink. The water flows without urgency, just a narrow stream making its way towards some destination you can't see. It might end at a public fountain, or perhaps a small garden in a courtyard above. Down here, the sound is the whole story, steady, rounded, almost like breathing. If you pause, you'll notice how the space itself shapes the sound. The walls catch each drip, each faint splash, and send it back in softened form, as if the tunnel is telling you the same thing twice so you won't miss it. Your footsteps add their own muffled note, mixing with the water's voice until you're not quite sure which is which. A historical note flows into mind. Underground conduits like this were part of Rome's hidden skeleton. Plumbers tended them as carefully as they tended the visible fountains and baths, crawling into these narrow passages with their tools to find leaks, clear blockages, or replace a section of pipe. Down here, far from the sun, their work was lit only by small flames and the glint of metal in hand. It's easy to imagine one of them kneeling at the very spot where you stand now, listening for changes in the sound of the flow. Maybe he tapped the pipe with the handle of his tool, just to feel the vibration, to be sure it was running true. Then he'd gather his tools, lantern swaying as he moved on to the next section. You walk slowly along the channel, the air growing cooler with each step. The sound of water follows you, threads around you, becomes something you feel as much as hear. Then, just as, gradually you notice a faint glow ahead, the suggestion of moonlight seeping in from an opening. The passage rises slightly, the air warming again, and soon you're stepping out into a secluded courtyard, where the flow you followed spills gently into a pool surrounded by stone benches. The courtyard is hushed, wrapped in a cool silver light. The pool in its centre is no grand spectacle, just a low oval basin of stone fed by the little stream we followed from the tunnel. The water enters with a soft trickle, barely disturbing the surface before it ripples outward toward the far edge. Stone benches curve around the pool, their surfaces smooth from years of use. They're cool to the touch, still holding the night's air. Overhead, a few vines trail from the balcony above, their leaves stirring slightly in the faintest breeze. Somewhere in the shadows, a cicada gives a slow, uneven call, as if even it is too drowsy to rush. You can still hear the journey in the water, a memory of its echoing path beneath the streets. Now, in the open air, it sounds softer, more settled. The lead pipe feeding the pool is tucked almost completely out of sight, just a sliver visible where it meets the carved stone lip. Its surface is darkened and pitted, but it works just as it always has. This courtyard is shared by a cluster of homes. By day, it's a meeting place. Neighbours chatting as they fill jugs, children dipping their toes at the edge, someone rinsing vegetables before dinner. But at night, it belongs to the quiet. The water and the stone keep each other company until morning. A small historical pebble drops into thought. Courtyards like this were a kind of social anchor in Roman neighbourhoods. They offered both a practical resource and a natural gathering spot, often placed where an aqueduct's branch line could feed into a simple distribution point. The design was humble, but the effect was profound, a shared source of something essential. You settle on one of the benches, leaning forward so you can see the moon's reflection in the pool. It wavers gently with the ripples, a bright coin spinning slowly in the dark. The air smells faintly of damp stone and crushed leaves, with a whisper of something floral, maybe from a potted plant left out overnight. It's tempting to stay here until the first light, letting the rhythm of the trickle replace any thoughts that try to intrude. Time feels both still and gently moving, like the surface of the water itself. Eventually, though, you rise. The pool's voice fades behind you as you follow a narrow path out of the courtyard. The walls close on either side. Ahead there's a glow, the kind of warm, flickering light that can only mean someone's kitchen is still awake, coaxing one last meal from the day. The narrow path opens onto a small side street, and the glow you saw comes from a doorway half shielded by a curtain of heavy fabric. The smell reaches you first, something warm and rich, with the sharp sweetness of onions just at the edge of caramelizing. Step inside and you find yourself in a kitchen that feels more like a tucked-away hearthroom than a shop. The walls are lined with shelves of clay pots, and a single low table sits in the centre. On it, a pot of stew rests beside a loaf of bread, the crust cracked open to let out its heat. Against the far wall, a small lead pipe pours a thin ribbon of water into a deep earthen jar. The jar is set into a ring of damp sand to keep the contents cool. The water flows quietly, a steady companion to the soft hiss from the pan on the hearth. The cook is an older woman, her sleeves rolled back, moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who's made this same meal hundreds of times. She dips a ladle into the stew and pours a little over the bread, letting it soak before tearing off a piece. The broth glistens in the low light, dotted with oil that catches the glow of the fire. A quiet historical taste. In many Roman homes, late-night meals were smaller affairs. Not the heavy feasts of midday, but warm bowls of leftovers transformed with fresh herbs or a splash of wine. Water, too, played its part, not just for drinking, but for stretching a stew, washing fruit, or cooling hands after work at the hearth. She hands you a bowl without a word, and you settle onto a low stool. The stew is simple. Beans, onions, a bit of cured pork, but the flavours are deep and comforting, like the worn surface of a favourite wooden spoon. You can hear the water trickling behind you, the sound soft enough to almost blend with the crackle from the hearth. It's the kind of kitchen that feels suspended in time, where the pace outside doesn't intrude. You eat slowly, letting each bite linger, feeling the warmth spread from your hands into your chest. When the bowl is empty, the cook pours you a cup of water from the earthen jar. It's cool, faintly mineral, and leaves a clean taste that makes the memory of the stew even richer. You thank her, but she just waves you toward the door, as if you've been here many times before and will be again. Back outside, the street feels quieter still. The glow from the kitchen fades behind you as you turn toward the sound of distant laughter, the kind that carries lightly through the night air, inviting you onward. The sound drifts along the street like a warm breeze, light and scattered with pauses where words fill the spaces between. You follow it past shuttered shops and shadowed doorways until the street widens into a courtyard strung with a few hanging lamps. A group of neighbours sits around a low table, cups in hand, the kind of gathering where everyone leans a little closer as the stories grow softer and funnier. The air smells faintly of grilled fish, citrus, and the tang of wine. Not sharp, but mellowed by the evening. Near one corner, a small fountain bubbles quietly, its basin just big enough for two people to stand beside. The water feeds in from a lead pipe that slips through a crack in the wall, worn smooth where countless hands have touched it over the years. Every so often, someone stands, fills a cup, and returns to the circle without breaking the flow of conversation. You're waved over and offered a seat, along with a dish of olives and a slice of cheese dusted with herbs. The cheese is soft, faintly salty, and carries the scent of thyme. The olives have been marinated with orange peel, their brine mellow and fragrant. The laughter rises again when someone recalls a market day mishap involving a runaway basket of figs and an unfortunate dog. The story needs no rush. It unspools slowly, with each person adding their own remembered detail, until everyone is grinning. The fountain's trickle plays underneath the words, as steady as a drum beat. Historical sip here. Gatherings like this were a fixture in Roman neighbourhoods. Without theatres or forums nearby, a courtyard could serve as the perfect social hub, with a shared water source doubling as the refreshment stand. The plumbing was practical but also quietly communal. Each pour a small offering to the group's ease. Someone tops up your cup from the fountain's cool flow. The water carries a faint mineral taste, like it's brought a little of the hillside with it. You drink slowly, listening to the next story. This one about a stubborn goat and an unlucky vegetable cart, as the night air wraps itself more comfortably around the group. Eventually the stories taper off into that pleasant silence between friends. The laughter has left its warmth behind, like coals in a hearth. You stand, offering thanks, and step out of the courtyard. The fountain's sound lingers for a while, even after the voices have faded, guiding you toward another place where water meets the night. The street narrows again, tilting gently downhill. You can feel the gradient in your steps, the way gravity pulls you forward just a little more than usual. Somewhere below, hidden under the cobbles, water moves with the same pull, following its slope towards some waiting basin or bath. You pass between high walls that seem to lean inward, their stones cool and faintly damp to the touch. A small archway opens on your right, just wide enough for one person to slip through. Inside is a courtyard barely larger than a room, its floor uneven with old paving stones. In the centre, a square pool sits flush with the ground, the surface so still it almost looks solid. At one corner, a lead pipe emerges from the wall, cut at an angle so the water slips down without a splash. The sound is more of a murmur than a trickle, like a voice lowered for a private word. The water gathers in the pool and seeps away through an unseen outlet, its journey quiet and unhurried. A fig tree leans over the courtyard wall, its branches heavy with fruit. One has fallen near the pool, splitting open to show its deep red heart. The scent is sweet, almost wine-like, and it mingles with the faint metallic breath of the water. You sit on the edge of the pool, feeling the cool stone under your hands. The lead pipe bears the marks of time, small dents, a line of solder that bulges slightly where a repair was made long ago. It's not polished or perfect, but it does its work as surely now as the day it was fitted. A small historical note drifts in. Roman plumbers often left subtle signs of their work, a certain way of folding the metal at a joint, or a distinctive pattern in the hammer marks. These weren't signatures in the modern sense, but they were as personal as handwriting to anyone who knew the trade. The air here is still, except for the soft movement of the water and the occasional whisper of leaves overhead. You can imagine someone coming here at dawn to draw a bucket, or in the heat of midday to wash their hands and face before returning to work. Tonight the pool is just a mirror for the sliver of moon above, holding the reflection without a ripple. After a time you rise, your footsteps soft against the worn paving. The water's murmur fades behind you as you find the main street again. Ahead, the faint scent of baking bread, late bread, meant for tomorrow, drifts through the air, drawing you toward the warm glow of another open doorway. The glow spills onto the street in a soft rectangle, and as you draw closer, the smell deepens. Not the quick, bright scent of fresh loaves from an early bakery, but the slower, more mellow aroma of bread baked for keeping. The doorway is open, letting the heat roll out in waves that soften the chill of the street. Inside, the room is small and spare. A single oven sits at the back, its open mouth glowing faintly red. The baker is working quietly, shaping rounds of dough into tight, smooth loaves. The air is thick with the scent of yeast and the faint smokiness of the fire. Against one wall, a narrow lead pipe feeds into a shallow trough of water. The surface trembles with each drop that falls from the pipe's lip, a quiet counterpoint to the baker's steady movements. The water here isn't for drinking, it's for dipping hands, for moistening cloths to cover rising dough, for cooling the heavy wooden paddles used to slide bread in and out of the oven. The lead pipe is worn to a dull sheen where the baker brushes past it again and again during the night's work. One of the loaves is finished and cooling on a low shelf. It's a dense, round bread with a cross scored into the top. The crust is deep brown, almost mahogany, and the steam still curls faintly from the cracks. Break it open and the crumb is warm and tight, with a faint tang from the long fermentation. A historical crumb of fact. Some Roman breads were made to last for days, meant to be eaten in thin slices with stews or cheese. Bakers would sometimes deliver them in the early morning, still warm enough to scent an entire street. The water used in the dough might have travelled miles through the city's hidden network, touching lead pipe after lead pipe before arriving here, ready to be weighed and mixed into flour. You sit on a small stool near the oven, feeling the warmth seep into your back. The baker hums under his breath as he works, the sound mingling with the soft rush of the oven fire and the faint drip from the trough. It's the kind of place where the outside world barely exists, where time is measured only in the rise of dough and the glow of embers. When you step back into the street, the bread scent clings to your clothes, and the warmth stays in your skin. The night feels softer now, the shadows deeper but less sharp. You follow the curve of the street toward a place where you hear not water this time, but the faint clink of pottery being arranged in the dark. The sound is light but steady, a careful rhythm of clay touching clay. It leads you to a low, open-fronted workshop where shelves run from floor to ceiling, lined with jars, bowls, and amphorae. The air smells of earth and ash, the scent of clay that's been worked, dried, and fired. A potter is moving quietly between shelves, adjusting the placement of pieces that are cooling from the day's kiln. His hands are dusty, the kind of dust that sinks into the lines of the skin and stays there. A single lamp hangs from the beam above, its light falling in a warm circle on the workspace. In one corner, a small basin catches a slow trickle from a lead pipe set into the wall. The water darkens the clay when splashed over it, deepening the colour from pale tan to a richer brown. The potter uses it to keep his sponges damp, to smooth the rims of bowls, and to soften clay scraps that will be worked again tomorrow. The pipe's surface is faintly dimpled, as though it remembers each tap of the hammer that shaped it. A historical note to set beside the pottery. Roman workshops often relied on just such modest water sources, with lead piping delivering a steady, manageable flow. It wasn't about volume here. It was about having just enough, exactly where it was needed. The potter gestures you over to a low table where several small cups rest in a neat row. Their surfaces are still chalky, waiting for the final firing that will bring out their true colour. He picks one up and runs a damp sponge around the rim, the water leaving a darker ring before it sinks into the clay. The trickle from the basin keeps the sponge cool, the movement unhurried. You sit for a while watching the simple repeated motions, a turn of the piece, a pass of the sponge, the soft click as it's set down again. The sound of the water keeps time, a slow metronome in the background. When you stand to leave, the potter nods once, his hands already reaching for the next cup. Back in the street, the night feels quieter still, as though the rhythm of that workshop has settled into your own steps. Ahead, a faint shimmer of lamplight dances on moving water, drawing you toward another story in the making. The street narrows to a gentle slope, the stones underfoot dark with the night's damp. That faint glow ahead becomes clearer, not just a lamp, but its reflection trembling on the surface of water. You emerge into a small square where a public fountain takes centre place, its pool edged in smooth marble worn by countless hands and buckets. The fountain's water flows from the mouth of a carved dolphin, the lead pipe behind it hidden within the wall. You can see where the marble around the spout has been polished by years of use, the stone gleaming faintly in the lamplight. The stream is constant and calm, making a soft splash that seems to settle into the very air of the square. A few late wanderers stop to fill their jugs, dipping them carefully so as not to disturb the stillness. The water's coolness sends a faint mist into the air, mixing with the scent of wet stone and the faint sweetness of something blooming nearby. Maybe night jasmine climbing a wall just out of sight. A small historical ripple. Fountains like this were fed by branch lines from the city's aqueducts, with lead piping guiding the final stretch. Their design was both functional and symbolic, a visible promise that the city's lifeblood flowed freely for all. You sit on the edge of the fountain, feeling the chill of the marble through your clothes. The sound of the water blurs the edges of everything else. Footsteps passing behind you, the muted call of someone down the street, even your own thoughts. From this spot you can see narrow alleys leading off in every direction, each one disappearing into shadow. The fountain feels like a quiet anchor in the middle of them, a place where anyone might pause before moving on. You trail your fingers in the stream, letting the cold bite just enough to wake the skin. Droplets cling before slipping free, falling back into the pool with tiny plinks. The ripples spread and fade, and the surface grows smooth again, reflecting the moon as if nothing had disturbed it. After a while you rise, your hands still cool. You take one last look at the dolphin's steady stream before stepping into one of the side alleys. The air grows warmer, scented now with spice and smoke, and ahead there's the low glow of another gathering just out of sight. The alley bends gently, and with each step the scent deepens. Cinnamon, pepper, and the faint smokiness of roasting meat. The glow ahead resolves into an open-fronted tavern, its wooden shutters pushed wide to let the night air mingle with the warmth inside. A long, low table runs the length of the room, scattered with clay cups and earthenware bowls. A few patrons linger over their meals, speaking in the low tones of people in no hurry to leave. At the far end, a brazier glows with embers, a spit turning slowly above it. The meat glistens in the firelight, each slow rotation sending another wave of scent drifting outward. Near the brazier, a small lead pipe feeds into a bronze jug, the stream no thicker than a quill. The tavern keeper uses it to mix watered wine and to ladle a splash into the pan where onions and herbs are softening. The sound of it is almost lost under the murmur of voices and the soft hiss of fat meeting heat. But it's there, a steady thread in the room's fabric. You're offered a seat and a small plate, slices of meat fragrant with cumin and coriander, resting on a bed of lentils. The flavours are warm and layered, the meat tender enough to break with your fingers, the lentils earthy and rich. A wedge of flatbread sits alongside, its surface blistered from the fire. A historical pinch. Roman cooks embraced spice blends traded from far-off markets, pepper from India, cinnamon from Ceylon, weaving them into everyday dishes for those who could afford the luxury. And water, even in such richly flavoured meals, had its quiet role in tempering wine, softening legumes, or balancing the intensity of a sauce. From your seat you can watch the tavern keeper reach for the jug again, filling a small cup with water before passing it to a patron who drains it in one slow swallow. No toast, no flourish, just the simple satisfaction of quenching thirst in the middle of a warm room. The conversation ebbs and flows, rising in laughter now and then, before slipping back into the comfort of murmurs. Outside, the alley is still and shadowed, the warmth of the tavern spilling into it like light poured from a cup. When you step back into the night, the air feels cooler against your face, and the spice scent lingers faintly in your clothes. Somewhere ahead, you hear the sharper sound of moving water. Not a trickle this time, but the quick, playful splash of something larger. The alley opens suddenly into a square alive with movement. Not busy exactly, more like a fountain that refuses to sleep. Its basin is wide and shallow, with a spray of water leaping from a central column carved in twisting patterns. The moonlight catches each arc, turning droplets into a scatter of silver beads before they fall with soft, overlapping splashes. Around the edge, children's sandals and scuffed toes have left the stone worn smooth. Even at this hour, a few neighbours linger, filling jugs or simply leaning on the basin's edge to talk. The sound is brighter here than the quiet trickles you followed all evening, layered and almost musical, the kind of water sound that pulls you closer without thinking. You step near enough to see where the lead pipes feed the fountain, hidden beneath the carved base. At one side, a small inspection cover has been left open, and for just a moment you glimpse the dull grey curve of the pipe before it disappears again into shadow. Whoever last worked here left the joints neat, the solder smooth, work done to last another generation. A historical ripple worth noting. Rome's grander fountains weren't purely decorative. They marked distribution points in the aqueduct system, with lead piping carrying water onward to smaller fountains, baths, and even private homes. This one might be feeding half a neighbourhood, the playful splash here mirrored in quiet trickles elsewhere. A vendor sits at the corner of the square, selling small figs wrapped in vine leaves. You take one, the leaf soft and faintly herbal, the fruit inside sweet and yielding. It's the kind of flavour that doesn't compete with the sound of the fountain but joins it, making a memory that's more about the place than the taste alone. The night air is cooler here, touched with the faint mist the fountain throws off. It settles lightly on your skin and clothes, leaving a chill that feels clean rather than cold. You watch the arcs rise and fall, each one perfectly ordinary yet endlessly new, and feel time loosen its grip. Eventually the square begins to empty. A last jug is filled, a final goodnight called across the water, and the splash becomes the square's only voice. You turn toward a street that slopes upward, the mist fading as you climb, until the sound is replaced by the dry shuffle of wind through high balconies and the faint scent of fresh turned earth ahead. The slope eases into a wide terrace, and the earthy scent grows richer, tinged with green. In the soft spill of lamplight from a nearby window, you see rows of potted plants, herbs, small citrus trees, and clay jars filled with flowers. Their leaves shift gently in the night breeze, releasing little bursts of scent each time. At the far end, a low wall frames a view of the city rooftops, scattered like dark tiles under the moon. Near the wall, a simple wooden table holds a wide basin half full of water. A thin stream slips into it from a lead pipe fitted through the terrace wall. The sound is almost too faint to notice, more like a whisper than a pour, but it's enough to keep the water fresh. This terrace belongs to a gardener, judging by the careful arrangement of pots and the neat bundles of drying herbs hanging along one beam. A few tools lean against the wall, a trowel, a watering can, and a basket lined with fig leaves. The air is cool and still, save for the quiet gurgle from the basin. A historical root here. In ancient Rome, rooftop and terrace gardens were prized not just for beauty, but for practical uses. Growing herbs for the kitchen, flowers for offerings, and small fruits to sweeten daily meals. Plumbing, even in these modest setups, brought water where it was most needed without the strain of hauling it by hand. You dip your fingers into the basin. The water is cooler than you expect, having travelled under the shaded streets before emerging here. The surface shivers slightly as each drop from the pipe touches it, sending out small rings that fade before they reach the rim. From somewhere inside the house, you catch the soft creak of a chair and the low hum of a voice. Not singing exactly, just keeping company with the quiet work of arranging something unseen. The sound blends with the water until both feel like part of the same slow rhythm. You rest for a moment against the wall, looking out over the rooftops. A few windows still glow, but most are dark. The city feels as though it's breathing, each neighbourhood its own small heartbeat in the night. When you step away from the terrace, the earthy scent follows you down the steps, fading into the warm smell of baking grain from somewhere below, a sign that the night's stories aren't finished just yet. The steps lead you down into a narrow street, the air thickening with the smell of grain toasted over heat. It's not bread this time. There's something deeper, almost nutty, with a faint sweetness curling in at the edges. You come to a small mill, its doorway open to the night. Inside, the floor is dusted in a fine layer of flour that softens every footstep. A pair of millstones sit side by side, one resting after the day's work, the other still turning slowly, pulled by a steady wooden arm. The sound is low and even, stone against stone, the same rhythm that's been repeating for hours. In one corner, a basin catches a thin stream from a lead pipe, the water spilling into a trough that runs out into the street. The miller dips a wooden scoop into the basin and pours the water over a heap of grain, dampening it before it goes under the stone. The smell rises at once, warm, earthy, and promising something good to come. A small historical kernel. Roman mills often relied on a steady water supply not just for cleaning grain, but for driving mill wheels in larger operations. Even in small street mills like this one, plumbing was a quiet partner, making the work smoother and the product better. The miller offers you a pinch of freshly ground flour. It's soft between your fingers, almost like silt, and smells faintly sweet from the grain's natural oils. He works without hurry, moving between the turning stone and the trough, his hands and clothes ghosted with white dust. You watch the water thread through its shallow channel, carrying away the chaff and husks in slow spirals. The lead pipe that feeds it has a slight curve, as though it was bent just enough to fit the space without wasting material. A practical touch, but it carries a certain quiet elegance too. The mill's warmth settles around you, not from fire, but from the work itself. The steady movement, the hum of stone, the faint splash of water. You could almost close your eyes and mistake it for a lullaby. When you finally step outside, the air feels cooler against your face. The scent of grain clings for a few steps before the breeze carries it away, replaced by the sharper, saltier smell of something cooking in the open air just around the next bend. The bend in the street widens into a small square, lit by a single brazier set on a low stone stand. Over it, a flat iron pan holds a scattering of small fish, their skins curling and crisping at the edges. The air is rich with the smell of the sea, briny, sharp and softened by the smoke from the coals. A man tends the pan with a wooden spatula, turning each fish so it browns evenly. Beside him, a clay jar sits in a shallow trough of water fed by a thin lead pipe. The jar's surface sweats in the cool night air, the water keeping its contents, likely a tangy sauce or brine, at just the right temperature. You're offered a piece of fish wrapped in a strip of fig leaf. The leaf is soft from the heat, its green edge slightly singed, and when you bite through it, the fish inside flakes away with almost no effort. It's seasoned simply, a little salt, maybe a brush of olive oil, letting the freshness speak for itself. A historical sprinkle. Street food like this was common in Rome's markets and squares, especially near the ports where fresh catch could be cooked within hours of landing. Lead piping often supplied the water to rinse the fish, clean the pans or cool jars of sauces. It was an unseen part of the trade, hidden in the edges of the stall. The trough beside the brazier catches your attention. The water in it is only an inch deep, but it's constantly moving, the trickle from the pipe pushing a slow ripple across the surface before slipping away through a small drain. Every so often, the cook dips his fingers in to rinse them, shaking off the droplets without breaking his rhythm. Around the square, a few people stand eating, their voices low. The brazier's glow paints the stones with shifting shadows, and the occasional pop from the coals punctuates the quiet. The smell of the fish hangs in the air, mingling with the cooler scent of the water in the trough. You eat slowly, savouring the way the warmth of the fish balances the night's chill. When you're done, the cook nods a brief farewell, already turning the next fish in the pan. You leave the square, your steps light, and follow a narrow lane where the darkness is deeper, the air cooler, and ahead, a single steady sound of water that feels like the night's last chapter calling you closer. The lane winds gently, the stones underfoot slick with the sheen of night air. The sound ahead is constant now, not a trickle or a splash, but a smooth, unbroken pour, like someone slowly emptying a jar into the dark. You emerge into a small courtyard enclosed on three sides by tall walls. In the centre, a wide stone basin catches a stream falling from a simple spout set high into the wall. There is no ornament here, no carved animal or scroll work, just the clean arc of water and the round, patient pool that receives it. The lead pipe behind the spout is mostly hidden, but the end shows enough to catch the faint gleam of lamplight. The metal is dull and smooth, its edges softened by years of use. The stream strikes the pool's surface with a sound that's round and deep, sending ripples out to the edges before they curve back toward the centre. No one else is here. The courtyard feels like a place meant for pauses, somewhere you might stand after a long day before heading the last few steps home. The air smells faintly of stone cooled by water, with just a hint of something floral drifting from a pot in the corner. A final historical note. These unadorned fountains were as vital as their grander cousins, especially in quieter neighbourhoods. They were the last link in a chain that began miles away at an aqueduct's source, carried forward by clay channels, stone conduits and lead pipes, each one a small promise that water would find its way here, night after night. You sit on the edge of the basin, feeling the cool stone through your palms. The water's sound fills the space without crowding it, wrapping the walls in a constant, gentle rhythm. You could close your eyes and stay here until the first pale light of dawn without counting the moments. Eventually you rise. The water keeps flowing, steady as breath, as you step back into the lane. The city is nearly silent now, its heartbeat slow and even, the same hidden network carrying its lifeblood under the stones. May these memories guide you into peaceful dreams. If you drifted off, let me know below. Sweet dreams. Until next time, whispered goodnight.